Hello, my fellow readers. This is I, Dark Symphony 777 with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. And finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, we are almost at the halfway point. Huzzah! Yes! Almost halfway through the Luniverse. It's been what? This will be week two or three. It helps that I'm doing them all in bunches instead of doing one at a time, which would be so long because by the time I finish it, it'd be September, October. I don't know. And I'm having fun just doing these in bunches. Don't worry, it's not going to be every single story. It's just going to be the Luniverse because it's just such a big story that I kind of have to do it this way. But we're still going through the Luniverse. Right around here, this will be the halfway story right here. And I got to do these two too. But we're looking at Musicians and Dreamers first. This is by Grass and Clouds 2. And honestly, out of all the stories in the first half of the Luniverse, let's actually look real quick on something. Alright, so this is the TV tropes page for the Luniverse. I'm only going here really quick just to point out that this is technically the 11th episode of all 26. There's 34 stories in total that I'm reviewing. These two are not finished, so I'm not going to be talking about them. But yeah, that's more or less it. Out of all of the first half of the Luniverse, basically episodes 1 to 13, this is actually the best. It sets up pretty much a large portion of the second half of the story. This is basically what kicks off the main bulk of the Night Court arc, the main bulk of that storyline. It gives us a lot of world building. It's the first story to give substantial characterization since Longest Night, Longest Day. And it also teaches a very poignant lesson. So, let's get to the plot. The plot has Lyra doing a little Lyra show in the park where she hears someone approaching. She's like, oh, it's just someone watching. But then they keep hearing it, getting closer, and basically end up right next to her. And then she hears unlatching. She has her eyes closed at this moment. So she hears unlatching, and she thinks, oh, it's the musician. That's fine. And then she hears the cello, and when she opens her eyes and turns to look, it's Octavia Philharmonica. So they do the show, and they talk. Octavia basically reveals, hey, they're doing this big old show in Canterlot that's going to be 3 months long. It's going to be based off the Lyre, and we want you to join. And Lyra is ecstatic. She thinks this is a big opportunity, a big idea to go. However, Lyra runs into Trixie. And Lyra spills the beans, saying, hey, I'm going to this 3-month show on Canterlot. It's like, when is it starting? It's like, I have to go tomorrow. No, I have to go in at the weekend because she's only there for 2 days, a day or two. Trixie is immediately suspicious, so she asks Lyra, when you get the chance, ask Octavia, where are you staying? Who's organizing the event? Because, as you all know, in the Luniverse, Trixie is technically a part of the Night Court. She's kind of out there, but she does want to actually fully immerse herself in the Night Court. However, Trixie also knows that the Night Court does have shady members, and she's worried after what happened in not this story, what's going to happen. Spoiler alerts, what's going to happen is kind of keep popping up. However, the main reason why Trixie's suspicious is because it just happened. It just happened out of nowhere. So Trixie is trying to protect Lyra, but she's kind of coming off heavy-handed. Lyra doesn't particularly trust Trixie. So it's like, you're hurting my... Like, Trixie's kind of going too far by kind of hypothetically implying that she would like blacklist her or keep her in Ponyville no matter what. And Lyra kind of gets hurt and tries, and she goes back and forth between Octavia and Trixie, because Trixie's trying to protect Lyra, and Lyra's not buying it because she's worried that Trixie is paranoid, and Trixie's just going to ruin Lyra because of what happened when Trixie inadvertently turned Lyra into human, and Trixie kind of came off the impression that Lyra doesn't really get paid, and it's just really not trusting of Trixie. However, Trixie, knowing how the Night Court works, or at least some specific members of how the Night Court works, is worried that they're going to be that Octavia's here under one of their orders to basically get Lyra out of Ponyville into one of theirs to basically just trap them, so that way they have the element, an element of harmony as like a political weapon, because again, for those who don't know, this story is completely different from the canon verse. In the canon verse, Celestia tries to keep the elements of Harmony's identity a secret. They only really, I believe, the identities are only, the identity of the elements of Harmony are really only revealed after they defeat Discord. Either after they defeat Discord or after they oust the Changelings. Because I don't think they want to find. No. They have the mural. They have the mural showing then defeat Discord, but Celestia tries to hide specifically where they live for a long time, because Ponyville's a Hobunk town. However, in the Lunaverse, not only does everyone know who the elements are, they also know that they live in Ponyville, because unlike the canon world, in this version, with the whole idea of a Congress, kind of everyone has providences, so it's much easier to travel between like a spy network, underground crime rings, messaging. So they kind of are. Not to mention what Trixie's like. Well, everyone, since Trixie bragged about it, everyone kind of knows. Oh, Trixie's in Ponyville. Just follow the dots. So they all know where, not only who the elements are, but they also know where the elements are. And this basically plays a part. What happens is, after they have, basically, Trixie is desperate at the end. She tries everything she could. She finds out that Lyra had a bunch of plans with her friends. She manages to get them to cancel. Trixie tries to do a sort of census to keep Lyra around, because, again, Trixie is so dang worried that this is a ploy, and spoiler alert, it is. Trixie ends up being right. That she basically tries to sneak past Octavia and give the paper to Lyra. However, Octavia knows how this sort of thing works. She's able to hum and figure out where there are blanks and illusions and sound waves. It's actually really clever. And Octavia manages to keep Trixie away. She does find out that the person in charge of the whole event is a man by the name of Duke Greengrass. Trixie knows Greengrass, really doesn't trust him, because if there's any member who's among the most corrupt, it'd be this guy. But eventually, Trixie is like a broken. She becomes depressed over the fact that she couldn't convince Lyra. So she tries one last grasp. She trudges her way to Bon Bon. Lyra is still mad, and Trixie knocks on Bon Bon's door. Bon Bon is at least willing to hear her out, because she kind of owes Trixie for the whole human thing, because Trixie was sincerely trying to help out Lyra. She's like, and Trixie's like begging. She's like borderline on her. However, you can get like on your hands and knees with a horse body you can get. And she begs Lyra, please, just listen to me. Hear me out. Just 5 minutes. And ultimately, Trixie manages to get to Lyra because she points out a lot of contradictions. It's like, why didn't you? Well, you're doing a show. Yes. Why didn't they auction you? Like, why didn't you do a rehearsal? So you're doing a rehearsal when I get there. It's like, but you don't know any of the music. Shouldn't you have? Did she show you any of the music? No. Okay, so there's a lot of you're going to the show without getting a test, without getting a rehearsal. You don't know any of the music. It's weirdly predicted towards stuff that you're good at. Why wait until now? And eventually, Trixie manages to get to Lyra. She said, just give me a chance. Give me just a single chance to prove that I'm right. And so what they plan is Trixie cast a massive illusion around the home of her own, and basically just makes it clean, and she hides Lyra somewhere around there, and then invites Octavia with the guise of trying to get her to slip, which actually does happen. Octavia is immediately wise to it at first because she knows that Trixie's trying to keep her there. So there's a tense moment where Trixie invites Octavia in. Octavia immediately suspicious because she's tested her humming thing, and she finds out the entire room is an illusion. Granted, it's literally the illusion is only like there to make the house look spotless because it's actually kind of a mess because Trixie's kind of slob. And Octavia even looks around trying to see where Lyra might be. And then eventually Trixie manages to make Octavia mad. Octavia slips that Duke Greengrass is basically he basically threatened me. It's like either I get Lyra out of Ponyville or he ruined my career. And he very well will do that. And all I want to do is teach you, even if I have to ruin everyone else, all my best friend's life, I will do it to keep my dream. So you're wondering, where's Lyra? I did say that Lyra was hidden. She is. But I never said she was hidden in the house. I said Trixie hit her. What happened was, in a very, very clever foreshadowing, they actually mentioned a prank that happened in their high school where when they were doing a test, two guys were cheating by having one have the old cup, 2 cups in a string trick, and one was and they were actually keeping it invisible. What they did was they kept the cup visible. They basically, among the mess was a cup connected to a string, a slack string that led outside, where Lyra was listening in on the other side. Lyra heard everything. She gets completely depressed because Lyra considered Octavia a really close friend, and this is where the lesson comes from: the fact that trust is a very fickle thing. Trust can, if you don't know unless you know someone absolute, like because I have a friend, I've known him for like almost 15 years. And I love him like a brother. And it would really hurt if randomly one day he'd take up this job and he kind of stabbed me in the back. That would hurt. And that's basically what this is. Trust is a very fickle thing. That you don't know what might happen. Something might change. And Octavia took that trust to her advantage to try and manipulate Lyra. You shouldn't absolutely fully trust everyone at every single time. You should always have a sort of niggling doubt. Do I have a niggling doubt about my friends? Yes, but that's natural. I'm pretty sure he has the same way about me. Does that mean I care about him? No, I'm wording it badly. I care absolutely about him. Like, I really care about him. But I'm not gonna act betrayed. Like, if he has to do something, if he like leaves and we can't be friends anymore, I'll be hurt. But I'm not gonna stop him from doing that. And I think that's a very poignant. I think that's a very important lesson that you should understand that people change. So you don't know what might happen, especially if you're not around them for a long time, because that's basically what happened. Lyra has not seen Octavia for a while, and she thinks that Octavia didn't change, and that's ultimately what happened. Duke Greengrass got his hands on Octavia, manipulated her, and basically caused her to forcibly sell Lyra's soul to the devil, or try to, because Octavia didn't want to give up her dream. I think that's really, and Lyra is more hurt over the fact that she would abandon a friendship like that. But Octavia didn't care. She just wanted her career. I think that's a really thought out lesson to be told about that. But yeah, but the plot ends with Lyra still, even after all that, even after having her soul crushed, the fact that Octavia was going to just basically rob Equestria of its greatest weapon against Corona. She still wants to save Octavia, because not only are they friends, but she understands that Octavia was being forced into it. So they give up. They do this whole scheme where they're about to go. The police show up. They have all this evidence against Lyra. They lock her up. Trixie not pretend to be drunk, and basically gets Lyra into jail, specifically so that way Octavia has an out, so that way her life's not ruined. Granted, if you see right here, there's actually a sequel, which actually proves that spoiler alert, Greengrass was wise on the whole thing, and he's kind of wise on this. And that's pretty much the plot. The plot is really really well done. It feels like a more adult version of My Little Pony. And everything is well done, from the meetup at the beginning in the park to the very, very clever foreshadowing with the prankster. Lyra and Trixie, they fight because Lyra is conflicted between believing Trixie or believing Octavia, because she's known Octavia longer, so therefore she has more trust in her. It's really well done stuff. It's absolutely heartbreaking when Lyra finds out the truth, and you can feel that she's just completely dead. She breaks inside. And it kind of leads into the character development. Octavia, really well done. She comes off as very aloof and standoffish, but she backs up her word. She's able to pull one over on Trixie. Spoiler alert, Trixie manages to actually beat Lyra's humming game at the Grand Galloping Gala, but that's more of a minor thing than anything better. But seeing Octavia lose to someone who's and another spoiler for a story a little later, where the Night Court actually believes that Trixie has like no games. Like, oh, Trixie's just no one who doesn't know how to play this game. She doesn't know about how the Night Court operates. But this proves that with Octavia losing, that they're underestimating Trixie as well. She does know the game, not as much. It's revealed at the end at the Grand Galloping Gala that Trixie doesn't know how bad it is, but she knows enough that, oh, here's how you do it. You gotta play smart. You gotta play it loose. You gotta adapt your plan as you go. You gotta make sure you're manipulating everyone. Trixie doesn't want that. She's trying to manipulate things, but to protect her friends. Which also leads to Trixie becoming so desperate to protect Lyra that she opens her mouth, she inserts a hoof, and makes things worse to the point where she's like begging, and you even see kind of like character development from Bonbon as like, well, Bonbon at the beginning of the story absolutely despised Lyra, but since she helped Lyra save the day in an earlier story, she's at least willing to hear her out. She doesn't like Trixie still, but at least she's going to like should at least hear her out. And then you have Lyra, who goes through this whole this whole thought struggle of do I trust the person who I'm instructed to protect the entire world from, who I barely know, who to kind of turn me into a human but also save the day, or someone I've known for years. And the reaction and her emotions as the story goes on, as she's becoming more frustrated with Trixie and kind of slides back with Octavia, and then the reveal where Octavia reveals her that she's manipulating Lyra, and Lyra it's so clever how the author writes that Lyra is like simultaneously like devastated, but also just completely furious. It's really well done. The grammar, I think there is I don't think there's any grammar errors. The pacing, it's 20,000 words. However, the story feels just goes between a blink and an eye. It's fast, but it's not. But everything, every action, every character moves with purpose, moves with meaning. It's very, very heavy on the plot themes, and even if you take in like the greater scope, again, this sets up the entire second half of season 1 because before this story, no one really took Trixie seriously about how dangerous the Night Court was, and the fact that Lyra was nearly manipulated, they actually start taking her more seriously about how dangerous the Night Court is. Granted, again, even Trixie doesn't really comprehend how depraved they are, not until the end. But it's very, very well done in how it's handled. And every single story beat has purpose. Every single action the characters do have purpose. It's all very woven into just a great story. I think this story is really well done. Would I recommend this story? Yes. Out of the first 13 stories, this one I would actually go the most out ahead. Granted, by default, you kind of have to read most of the Lunaverse stories because they're all supposed to like play a part in the finale. So even if I didn't like this story, I'm kind of with how important it is to like the greater scope of the season, I would have to. But that also means that this story is like really, really good when it matters. Favorite part, I actually do love Trixie confronting Octavia with the whole illusion. I think that was really well done. It showed how desperate that Trixie is to want to help her friend and show her how bad an idea this is, as well as the clever callback to the beginning of the story. That's really entertaining. This is just a great story. I have nothing bad to say about the story. Let me see how long the story. I may be able to do this story. Okay, so we're back with Canterlot Morning. This is technically a direct sequel to Musicians and Dreamers. I figured I actually have time. I'm going to do the story as well. This is a 3-chapter story. But before I get into this, let me finish up with Musicians and Dreamers. It's a really great story. If I rated like all the Lunaverse stories like collectively, then this one would probably be the second or third best. Hero Oten is by far the best one of the entire of all the stories, and I think at the Grand Gala minus the controversies, that story is like really, really well done. So yeah, it's Musicians and Dreamers, Hero Oten, at the Grand Gambling Hall. Those are what I consider the three best stories in the universe. But let's get to A Canterlot Morning, written by Green and Grass Clouds 2 as well. Yeah. Octavia liked the mornings. There was something musical about them, she thought, and not just the songs of the birds or the last few sighs of Canterlot Castle before it went to sleep for the day. Those were lovely on their own, of course, but there was something more that tied it together. The sun, silent though it was, as it rose, its light gradually slipped over the castle ramparts and began to bathe the courtyards and hallways in light. The morning dew and fog evaporated into nothingness as the sun struck them, leaving behind clean, pure fields and walls, ready for whatever the day had to throw at them. Everything seemed fresh and new, like a blank piece of staff paper. The possibilities were limitless. Whenever Octavia stayed overnight in the castle, and now it was happening more and more lately as the number of late-night concerts she gave to the nobles kept growing. She made it a point to watch the sunrise from one of the towers, with a nice cup of coffee and perhaps a light scone. She partook a few physical pleasures, having sacrificed most of them for the sake of her craft, but this was one that she allowed herself. These mornings often inspired her, even giving her ideas for her next compositions and putting her in the mood to practice some of her more joyous, hopeful works. The cellar strained the last for tea and watched as the Canterlot streets continued to come alive. Though the court was nocturnal, much of the rest of the Canterlot still worked by the sun, and she could see the residents begin to open their windows to perform their morning chores. From somewhere close by, she heard footsteps and shouts of marching ponies. The rural guard out on the morning drills. More distantly, the early express tooted its horn as it began its journey to the furthest reaches of Equestria. Near and far, the sounds of the city that were of a town waking up for a brand new day. Octavia smiled, savoring these sounds. She heard them all with a clarity and precision that, she knew, few ponies could match. 30,000 horns of solo practice, of listening, training, and of relentless effort to sharpen her ears to the point where she can hear even the faintest deviation of a note from the intended frequency, that she could hear other sounds too with a nice bonus. One that she took great pleasure in. It was a reward, Octavia liked to think, for her hard work and discipline. The gray-coated mare smiled as she rose from her seat. It was a beautiful day. She had just heard a beautiful morning, and now she had 4 hours all to herself where she could further refine her talents and master her craft. The mare shut the window and trotted over to the music stand and her cello. No pony would disturb her as long as she practiced. The floor, ceilings, and interior walls of the room had been perfectly soundproofed, and she had verified this herself. Not even she could hear anything inside the room from outside, or vice versa. The outer wall was soundproofed. That would have required treating the external surface, and as she was near the top of the tower, that wouldn't have been safe. But unless some pony was hanging out on the wall, that wouldn't matter. She would be free to experiment and improve without having to worry about some passerby pony hearing a mistake. It wasn't like her practice room at all. Sorry for interrupting. I do like the moment. I'm also Carrot Top season. I forgot that story was really good. Those 4 stories. Yeah. So yeah, Musicians and Dreamers moved to 4. At the Grand Gambling Gala, Carrot Top season, then Oten. Sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting at this point of the story. That story just completely blanked my mind. Apologies. Let me get it. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Okay. It wasn't like her practice room at home, she thought. As much as she tried, she hadn't been able to soundproof it perfectly. And while her neighbors were perfectly kind, she hated the thought of them hearing her mistakes or incomplete compositions. But one thing Greengrass had promised her when she signed on with him was a practice room and Greengrass. And just like that, her good move vanished. Clenching her teeth just slightly, Octavia picked up her cello and carefully balanced it. Greengrass wasn't important, and the more she could just forget about him when she practiced and performed, the better. There was only the music, transformed by her skill, and her instrument from notes on a page into glorious, beautiful sounds. His particular warm-up piece was a light, happy ditty, not without its complexities, but still simple enough that she could play without much thought. She picked up her bow, took her cleansing breath, focused on the cheerful, upbeat energy of the piece, and began to play. She 5 minutes later, when she was done, she had to admit that it hadn't gone well. She got wrote all the notes right, of course, and the gross details, dynamic, tempo, phrasing. It would have been acceptable for most private parties or many concert halls. Even many young nobles would have liked it. Octavia knew better, and she was too honest with herself to pretend that it was a good performance. That spark, the happy core of the piece, wasn't coming through. The tones were just a bit too muted, the phrasing a shade too constricted, and as a result, the music just didn't meet her standards. The cellist looked out the window in a vain attempt to capture her good mood, but she knew it was futile and almost immediately chided herself for her weakness before turning away. She had never before needed to worry about her emotional state before a performance. Calm and taciturn by nature, she could easily connect with whatever emotion she needed for a particular piece. But lately, she was finding that harder, especially for happy and light works. Octavia, unlike many of her colleagues, did not believe that a musician should attempt to put herself in a mood congruent with whatever music she was about to play. She had tried to play it on recommendation from her teachers, but it always felt fake, and so had the resultant music. She could make herself happy by visualizing a beautiful morning, or a perfect performance for Luna, but that was never the precise shade of happy inherent in the piece. It might be close, but for her close was never good enough. And the resulting mismatch between her own emotions and those of the music always dragged down her performances. She could hear the incongruity, even if nobody else could. Rather, she tried to connect with whatever emotion was already there. In the music, her own mood, she figured, was not relevant, so long as she can feel the sadness in the limit of Delamere, or the sheer joy and triumph over Tierek. What did it matter to her if she herself was happy or sad? It was the music that was important, not her. By now, she had perfected her ability to forget herself and immerse herself in music, to demonstrate whatever emotion had been inscribed there by the composer without letting her feelings leak into it. Were her performances influenced by her personal style? Yes, but in deliberate ways, particular phrasings that she chose for specific reasons, or carefully controlled improvised sections to reinforce certain themes. Nothing so frivolous as being sad that day. Or at least, that was how she used to be able to perform. But lately, she was finding it harder and harder to look past herself and play happier works. It was like there was a wall there, preventing her from connecting with them. Octavia shook her head and hefted her bow again. She knew why she was having trouble connecting with happy pieces, and it didn't matter. She would work through it. Octavia Philharmonica was a musician, not some pathetic whiner who would throw down her bow whenever she was not in the right mood to play. She would fight past this blockage and be all the stronger. There was no use wallowing in self-pity or remaining in this state for one moment longer. Unless she was going to channel her angst into some new composition or improvised performance, she froze for a moment. Then she shifted her stance slightly, one more appropriate for a longer piece. Maybe that will help, she thought, to play it out. Maybe then I can move past this lapse and get back to my usual training regime. And so she began to play a Latone poem. The introduction was bright and strong, outwardly simple in its purity, yet with enough subtleties to denote a sort of elegance and refinement. The hero, thought Octavia distantly, with whatever fraction of her mind was unoccupied with synthesizing and performing the piece, hard-working and honorable, virtuous, noble even, and the music gained in complexity, layering back upon itself as if to demonstrate the hero character's advancement and progression. From a young idealist to a skilled craftsman, the progression in a clean, warm manner. She began to play in the lowest reaches of the cello. Most ponies couldn't play two voices at once on an instrument, but Octavia had the skill to add in the second character. The lower voice started by simply filling in a few holes that the middle voice couldn't quite reach, but gradually took on a more and more, till it was constantly assisting the middle tones, hitting whatever notes they couldn't and allowed them to sing in more and intricate patterns. But then the helper threatens to leave. The hero is frightened. The lower voice began to miss at odd intervals, forcing the middle notes to leap around and race to plug in the missing gaps. The music sounded extraordinary, intricate melodies that seemed to almost jump off the cello as they switched between the battling voices. But Octavia ignored this. Her mind was on the performance. Praise could come later. At last, the hero weakens. She will do what the helper demands. The lower voice rose a bit in triumph, and middle failing in meek acceptance. but then they played together once again. Two allies at peace, with no enmity between them. The music resumed the heights it had reached earlier, the middle voice weaving melodies, the lower one reinforcing, setting a beat, and performing all the useful tasks that the middle one needed to shine. The helper slowly died away, and the third voice, at the upper reaches of the cello, came in. The middle and high voices bounced off each other, testing as the middle raced upwards and the upper descended, but in a light, teasing way. The manner of two old friends who were so close that they could challenge each other without any risk of hatred or fear. And indeed, after a few moments, the two began to build on each other, but unlike with the helper from below, before, the hero and her friend didn't have a leader and a backer between them. They both sounded beautifully, casting melodies and harmonies into the early morning air, taking turns in front or sharing the spotlight. They complemented each other, each much stronger with the other voice than it could possibly be alone. But after a few minutes of this, trouble arose. The middle voice grew in prominence, racing to outperform and defeat the high voice. The high voice at first was almost swept away, hanging on by a few notes in the upper reaches that could do more than deflect the vanguards of the middle voice harmonies. Victory for the hero seemed certain. One could almost hear the echoes of the helper, though his notes were not in the evidence, from the melodies woven by the hero. It is not to be. The friend realizes at last what she must do, and because she is still true to herself, honest and pure, she sweeps aside the hero. The high voice begins to grow, slowly at first, but faster and faster, until it was the hero who was barely hanging on, and this was no longer a sweet tune, but a vengeful rampage. The hero's melody were shattered or thrust aside by the unstoppable force of the friend, who drove down the solo in a whirlwind of sharp-pointed harmonies and a single melodic line that marched onward unstoppably and left no room for escape. The middle voice collapsed, and the friend's melodies were the only one heard. In the end, Octavia played a few melodies of the friend, now mournful, but still undaunted and unbroken. A mayor who still had the integrity to face the world. The helper was there too, much the same as before. None of this had hurt him in any way, but the hero, well, the final melody was limping and sad. There was still beauty there, and of course, skill. But it was clear that the hero voice had lost something very important. The piece ended on a few final notes that trailed off, as if following whatever it was the hero had discarded. Octavia collapsed on her stool when she was done. Emotionally drained, she realized, to her slight surprise, that she had spent almost an hour playing. That was a lot longer than she had planned, but she felt like she had accomplished something. She felt refreshed and clean. That is proof that I'm still honest in my music, if in nothing else, she thought. Whatever I said to Lyra, whatever my other depraved or treacherous acts, the integrity of my music is not compromised. I suppose that is something. She did not often wonder whether or not Lyra would forgive her for her betrayal. In a certain sense, it didn't matter. She judged herself by her own standards, no putting us's, and by those standards she committed a foul and traitorous act. No matter how often the Duke said that every pony did it, but sometimes, in her more wistful moments, she'd find herself wishing that Lyra would write her and tell her that it was all right, that she understood, that she was forgiven, that they could be friends. And then she caught herself and cast those thoughts out. If Lyra wrote that, it would be a lie. It was unacceptable what she had done, and she deserved no forgiveness. On top of that, now she apparently wanted Lyra to lie in order to make her feel better. Another crime on top of the first. So, Octavia forced herself not to think of such things. She had failed. She was not worthy of being Lyra's friend, and that was all that there was to it. But at least she could appreciate the failure and see it honestly, even to the point of demonstrating it in her music. Moreover, even though her piece was critiquing her, she hadn't let that stop her from playing the best. There was a kind of honesty in that. Still, I don't think I'll play that one in public, she thought, with a small sigh. In terms of technical skill, it was extraordinary. There was definitely wit, and there definitely was beauty there, but it was still a very dark and depressing piece. Like a painting of some horrible tragedy, it was excellent portrayal of something that no pony would want to see. The kind of music they would play when sentencing some famous war hero or legend. After having uncovered some horrible scandal, not suitable for the dinner parties and ceremonies I play at. She drank from her water bottle and rose. She felt a lot better now. It was feeling up to try that warm-up piece again. She felt confident that she could play it correctly now. And then maybe she could move on to real pieces. She had a new sonata for the wedding of Ice Cream Prusen's cousin that she had to finish. And she was scheduled to play for one of Fancy Pants' charity balls later in the week. Of course, Fancy Pants is pretty sure. Yeah, Fancy Pants is one word. Yeah, apostrophe, unneeded apostrophe right there. There, let me get that. Let me get rid of that. She needed to practice the core piece of that performance, the Sonata Grande and the Valse Barante. She heard the faintest noise in the direction of the window. Most ponies would have discarded it. After all, it sounded like a hoof step, and it was obviously impossible for a pony to be walking on the outside of a tower. Set aside that the walls are vertical and almost sheer. Octavia was high above the rest of the Canterlot, and any climbing pony would certainly be badly hurt if they fell. This logic gave even Octavia a moment of pause. But her ears were among the sharpest in the country, and she very rarely made mistakes. She heard some interloper, and they were there. Is it an obsessed fan who wants to see me practicing? No. More likely it's a political spy, thought Octavia, frowning as she went over to the window and opened it. Who would have thought that being a court zealous would lead to so much intrigue? Well, it's my own fault for getting involved in it. Octavia looked out the window and then carefully examined the tower wall. But she didn't see anything. The wall appeared to be perfectly empty. So she was really hearing things, in which case she had a very serious problem. Or whoever was spying on her was invisible, which is also a serious problem. She knows some techniques to fight invisible or illusioned ponies, mostly by playing the note and listening for oddities in the echoes. But it didn't work outside, where there was nothing to echo against. What could she do now? She heard another faint sound. Something patted on scraping on stone. She turned as she was looking straight up the tower, at least as much as she could, and squinted. Was there something vaguely hazy above her? She couldn't tell. Her eyes were no better than the average pony's, and she couldn't see through illusions, but she was absolutely confident that the sound had come from this direction. Can I help you? She asked. There was simply a sound in response to that. A rustle of fabric on stone, like whoever it was had been spooked and was gripping the wall a bit more tightly. I can hear you, said Octavia. If you want to listen to my performance, purchase a ticket. I am. The space above her shimmered, and suddenly she could see a pony head looking at her. It was covered in a mask with colors rippling across it. Some kind of unicorn weave, probably. All she could see beneath the mask were the eyes. Two bright, curious orbs. Oh, said the floating head. I'm sorry. I know it was terribly rude of me to eavesdrop. The voice also sounded familiar. A female voice, light, musical, and refined. But Octavia couldn't place it. It was distorted in some way. Just enough to mask its owner. But I was just passing by and I heard your music. It was so extraordinary that I couldn't help but stop and listen. I wasn't aware that burglars enjoyed the Grasshopper Sonata, managed Octavia. Calm. Stay calm. It's not really a talking head. The rest of her body is still invisible, that's all. I don't know if she's a spy or a burglar or some complete lunatic, but I will not be afraid. I am Octavia Philharmonica, and I will not be scared by some deranged mountaineer groupie. I will take a moment to regain myself, and then I will call the guards. That first piece? No, I meant the one you just did. The three-voice tone poem was incredibly moving. Octavia blinked. Her plans to call others forgotten. Spy, burglar, or whatever. Apparently they knew something about music theory. That was unexpected. It's not at all like your usual works, continued the head. And I'm not a burglar. Would you like me to come in? It must be uncomfortable for you, craning your neck like that. You're the one hanging off a castle wall, thought Octavia. But she wasn't sure what else to do, and despite herself, she was curious. She nodded her head. I suppose. The head vanished, but Octavia heard faint footsteps and scratching sounds approaching her position. She pulled herself back into the room, and a moment later she heard a quiet clocking sound as the invisible mare swung in and dropped to her hooves. This is a spy. It's a very unusual one, she thought. And then the invisibility spell vanished, and Octavia could see who she was talking to. Do you always travel via exterior wall? Asked Octavia, unsure how to begin the conversation. The mare chuckled. She was clad from head to hoof in that same fabric that concealed her face. It rippled, catching the light and throwing it back at the cellist, making it very difficult for her to look directly at the newcomer. Octavia could see a horn and could tell that the pony was female, but that was about it. The masked mare didn't answer the question. She just said, "If you don't mind me saying so, that piece you just played sounded particularly inspired. And it was technically brilliant too. It sounded like you had been polishing it for weeks. Remarkable improvisation technique. Why do you think it was improvised? You had a few pieces that you would have refined more. Had you researched this piece? First time when the mood on high voices met, for instance? If you're playing that for the audience, that part would have been more gradual. Complex melodies began so quickly that it wasn't clear at first that the two voices hadn't met in some time. If you perform that piece after some more practice, I think you would usually wait about 30 seconds before increasing the complexity." It was a surprisingly accurate criticism. This mayor seemed unusually knowledgeable about music. "You seem to know about my music." "Your music is worth it." The mayor trotted closer to Octavia. "And this particular piece," I'm also adding French voice because Fleur is French, or French. "Incredible complex rhythms and melodies. Yet the basic ideas were remarkably clear. The pregnant rise, a flourishing temptation. The interplay between the lower and the middle voices was brilliant. Then, her corruption. She meets the higher voice. She wavers in conviction, but in the end she falls." Octavia raised an eyebrow. Even amongst the nobles of the city, many of who had music training, if only for appearances, it is rare to find some pony who grasped her so well. "I think the ending was my favorite part. The high voice not only resists being corrupted, but a melody reinforces what remains of the middle voice to build her back up, redeem her." "Oh, so she doesn't understand me at all. I may need to revise the ending then." Then no redemption of any kind was intended. The piece was intended to be a tragedy. She couldn't see how, but the mayor looked disappointed. "Somehow. I thought you believed that honesty was the most important virtue in music. The ending was perfect, Octavia, and you know it. If you changed it to alter the message, you would be performing a lie." "Then you Wait." Octavia's eyes narrowed. "How did you know about me? Who are you?" "You might be able to persuade yourself in your thoughts," continued the mayor, "but you're too honest a musician to lie in your rock. The final melody was not the lament of a prisoner or the cries of a wreck were a direct callback to the beginning. The middle voice was just starting out and had yet fallen. Those last few notes were the basis for the first melody in that work. You extended the piece from a minute, you come for a second." "Who are you?" repeated Octavia. "A friend. A friend who is aware of what happened between you and Lyra Hepstrings, and who wishes to help you mend your relationship." Octavia's smile was bitter. "So that's a game. I see. You promise me that I can make up for my mistakes, sign on with you or your superior, and leave my current patron. I'm not interested." The mayor laughed. Octavia had never heard anything quite like it. It was a light and tinkling sound, almost bird-like. "Is that who you think I am? A political recruiter?" "Yes! I know of no other way could have known transpired, nor any other reason why you would be interested in this matter." She turned to leave, but the mayor somehow got around her. She was amazingly fast. I stepped between her and the door. "I am interested," she said quietly, "because I am on the court." "You are correct in that. You are correct in that. And you are a question. That means I am supposed to look after you. That is the purpose of the court. There are innumerable ponies in Equestria. Do you scale Do you scale all of the houses?" The mayor laughed again. "No, but you've been harmed by the court, and so, even though I had nothing to do with it, it is partially our responsibility to help remedy that harm." "No," said Octavia, still had her pride and some semblance of integrity, and she could not let that statement pass unchallenged. "On the rare occasions when I've erred during a performance," she said, her voice calm and strong, "there is always a cadre of ponies who swarm me afterwards to tell me that the mistake was not my fault. It was due to a defect in my cellar, or an overly humid environment, or a piece of spoiled fruit that I ate the night before. I have never accepted this as an excuse. I alone am responsible for my performances. Other factors may make my job more difficult, but it is my job to overcome them and perform correctly regardless. Celis took a breath. It is the same here. No pony has harmed me. I did what I did willingly, and I would not blame another for my act. Any subsequent harm was self-inflicted. Your concern here is genuine, remedying some injury done to me by the court. You may consider your task discharged. The look the mayor gave her was gentle. Isn't that a high standard? Rather high standard. Could any pony blame you if some horrible disaster hurt your performance? Some incredible pleasure? I do not ask other ponies. I am my own critic. If I didn't have high standards, I would have no right to perform, she frowned. A music who stands before a crowd implicitly promises to play something worthy of their time. Something so remarkable that no other task those ponies could perform in would be as beneficial as listening to that performance. If I could only play well in a clean, perfectly controlled environment, I could never hold up my end of that bargain when I took the stage. The mayor tilted her head. I see. You take your job very seriously. Yes. So if you're here to convince me that I'm an innocent victim who has done nothing wrong, or, oh no, Octavia, I respect you too much to lie to you like that. The mayor began to approach the door. You took a step down the wrong path. I'd like to help you understand that you can get right to the right one. Why don't we have some tea and talk about it? I have to practice. This won't take long, and it's very important. The mayor's voice grew more serious. Lyra needs your help, Octavia. I cannot help. That is very unfortunate. And the mayor's voice became harsh still. Because without you, it is likely she will be hurt. We both know what your patron wants with her, and what he will do once he learns he can't have her. I have no influence over him, and no power to shield her from his grasp. There will come a time when Lyra will depend on you. The mayor opened the door. If you want to be able to help her, come with me. Slowly, as if hypnotized, Octavia followed. The tea was very good. Octavia had never tasted anything quite like it. It was sweet without being cloying, and strong but not overpowering. It's my special blend, said the mayor. She had removed her bodysuit. In fact, it turned invisible again when they left the practice room, and Octavia had been forced to follow the mayor by her footsteps. She had only made visible once again once they entered a small, secluded door into a cozy living room-like area, with no hints as to who owned it. My mother made it when I was young. It is good, said Octavia. By the way, you still haven't told me who you are. The mayor shrugged. Does my name matter? I'm trying to help you. My patron said the same thing, and he has, in many ways. My agent can scarcely keep up with the bookings, and even viceroys and viceroys desire my services. Octavia, please. I know you aren't happy with obtaining your success in this way. Octavia bowed her head and said nothing for a long moment. Then, what do you want from me? I want you to help Lyra when she needs it, which means I want you to acknowledge that you can. I've had that opportunity before, and you know the course I took. Octavia shook her head. Like you said earlier, I value honesty. I will not pretend that I have more integrity than I demonstrated, so take a different course next time. The mayor rose. Octavia, have you wondered why your patron selected you? You are a spectacular musician, but there are more than one of those in Canterlot. Because I was Lyra's heartstrings friend and mentor. So could influence her the most. Why has he retained you then? I have access to every noble who commissions a performance from me. Also, I can identify ponies by ear, not just by sight. So am useful when he wants to identify a disguised pony. The second part of that seemed to surprise the mayor. By the hoof patterns, I suppose. Yes, by their gaits. According to my patron, most of the ponies in the castle with illusion magic only change how they look, not how they sound. She snorted. You fancy pants, who I understand is supposed to have substantial magical talent, makes the same mistakes. He was in disguise at that big social last month, pretending to be a Pegasus servant. Apparently, he planned to surprise his mayor friend Fleur de Lis. Wink, wink. but I heard him walk by, and without seeing him or knowing that he meant to keep his presence a secret, greeted him by name. My patron was impressed. He said I am very unusual in being able to hear that well. And how do you know? And how does he know you will use that hearing? For that matter, you have access to the other nobles to help him. The mayor approached Octavia. He knew how critical you are of yourself. He knew that once he manipulated you into thinking that you couldn't resist him, that you would slouch. You would never permit yourself to think otherwise. That you would forever work for him because you couldn't forgive yourself that one error and allow yourself to think that you could resist him. I. Octavia hesitated. She had never told anybody what she was about to say. You act as if I never tried to fight him before, as if he swindled me or took me by surprise. That was not the case. It had been obvious for days that he was going to try and recruit me. He sent me messages, he attended my concert, he even arranged for me to play at a prestigious charity ball, one of Fancy Fancy's large parties, and the link that he had done it. I had no desire to work for him. I wanted, of course, to rise based on my talent. I thought to myself for a week how foolish he was, trying to bite me. And I imagined myself exonerating him and sending him home empty-hoofed when he finally approached me. I was as prepared as I could be. It didn't matter. What exactly did he offer you? He had me meet in his office in the castle. He told me that if I helped him with few small favors, he can assure that I was playing for members of the court day and night if I chose. And the orchestra in the country would beg to have me. If I didn't, he would end my career and see to it that I could not find work anywhere. And all I had to see was myself as an old crone, dusty instrument that hadn't been played for an audience of 50 years. I saw myself prevented from doing the only thing that I ever wanted to do in my life. She bowed her head. I accepted his terms. I know I would accept them again. Would you? Knowing what they cost you? Octavia hesitated. If you approached Lyra with the same terms, what would you tell her? To reject him, said Octavia immediately. The mayor raised an eyebrow knowingly, but Octavia blushed. No, Lyra has more to fall back on, and her character is superior in that. Be honest with yourself, the mayor interrupted. Please, consider that you're better than you give yourself credit for. Octavia hesitated for a long moment before shaking her head. I am only as good of a musician as I am, she said, because I do not forgive myself any error. Yes, that is your weakness. Green grass is exploiting it, said the mayor. When you have a weakness in your technique, you correct it. It is no different. You want to be a great musician and a true friend. You need to be able to forgive yourself. And I suppose I take your advice. Inform Lyra that I ate her, try again, and fail. The mayor chuckled. Do you hide from difficult tasks due to your fear of failure, Octavia? Do you shy away from challenging pieces? Is that what a true musician does? Octavia didn't answer. Instead, the cellist finished her tea and rose. She was feeling quite strongly that she needed to skip the room, lest the mayor start to sway her. I will think about what you said. I really must return to my music now. Thank you for the tea. You're welcome. If you want to speak again, just stick a piece of parchment outside your practice room window. I will find you. Octavia raised an eyebrow. Do you climb that tower every day? Yes, I find it a particularly exhilarating form of exercise. And the guards don't mind? Dodging them is half the fun, the mayor laughed. It was bright and joyous. It sounded almost like Greengrass's laugh, but more wholesome somehow. But if you wish, I won't climb that tower while you're practicing. I play music myself a little, and I know it can be irritating to be eavesdropping on while practicing. I would appreciate that, thank you. Octavia exited the room and began the long trot back toward the tower. Fancy Pants smiled when he entered his quarters in the castle. Hello, dear. Fleur's form rippled into visibility. She was hanging on the ceiling by her hind legs, reading a report. Hi, she jumped down, flipping so that she landed on her four hooves. As she trotted over to kiss her culprit, she asked, How was your night? Productive. I think I'm finally starting to nail down Greengrass's quarters, and what are you smiling about? Fleur's eyes twinkled as she slipped behind Fancy Pants and shut the door. Oh, I was just remembering a certain charity ball a little over a month ago. You know, the one you were going to go in disguise as a Pegasus servant to? Yes. What about it? You wouldn't tell me when I saw you why you dropped the illusion. but I was just having a delightful chat with one, excuse me, Miss Octavia Philharmonica over in that little lounge in the Eastern Tower end. Fancy Pants' face was bright red. Oh. Fleur giggled. Didn't you once tell me that you were so good at illusions that you could fool even the Shiverboats? But I suppose a cellar is a different thing. All right. Fancy Pants smiled and bowed his feet. But let's be fair. Philharmonica's hearing is remarkable. I don't think any pony can get by her. Wait, Trixie. He chuckled ruefully. How long did it take her to identify you? Fleur's smile began a big, great grin. She didn't, did she? Managed Fancy Pants. Don't be upset, dear. I did learn from the best. Fleur slipped over to the kitchen area. She was almost skipping with happiness, although more of that was due to the fact to Fancy Pants' return than her triumph. Well, half of her happiness, at least. But no, she has no idea who I am. How? Fancy Pants paused, looking at Fleur walk. Wait, that's not how. Fleur poured 2 glasses of wine, and when she trotted back to Fancy Pants, the wine hovering before her, it was with more refined and regal moments. You taught me how to talk, and move, and even walk to fit in with these high society ponies. But I never forget how I used to be. Octavia can identify ponies by their gait, but I, too, the high society concert one, you taught me, and the street ones I used to have. She only ever heard me in my role as your empty-headed consort. Fleur chuckled. I just used the gay she hadn't heard before. Ah. Fancy Pants stretched and sat down on a couch against the one end of the room. You surpass me once again. Dear, if I didn't surpass you on occasion, this would be quite a dull relationship. They both laughed and snuggled together on the couch. Fancy Pants sighed in contentment. I'm a little surprised. I'm a little surprised, though. I thought you weren't going to talk to her for another week or two. I wasn't, but I felt bad for her. Fleur's happy expression vanished. She looked angry. It's not right what Greengrass is doing. Half the nobles in the courts will forgive themselves any crime or failing if it's in the service of wealth, power. That's if they're seeing anything wrong with what they do in the first place. Tavia will forgive herself anything, blast herself for even the smallest faults. Then Greengrass convinces her that she's the most corrupt and least honest among them. He has no scruples, said Fancy Pants. I hate him. Fleur shook her head. Taking down other nobles is one thing. Half of them deserved it. They at least took the risk knowingly, but involving civilians, the ponies he's supposed to protect, hurting them so he can manipulate them for him more easily. I know, dear. Fancy Pants does it up against her. I don't like him either, but we have to be careful. If he thinks that Octavia will betray him and tells his secrets, he will think twice about removing her. And he so mentioned the court that we might not be able to stop him. She won't make any sudden moves. It's not in her personality. And I'll keep a close eye on her and him. No, I'm watching Greengrass. He still thinks you're a vapid fool, so he grows suspicious if you seem to be focusing on him. I don't mind acting that way usually, but when I see him, see how that slimy jerk holds me in contempt. Fleur sighed. I suppose it's a good thing that I rose against bucking bad politicians off Canterlot Tower. There wouldn't be many left, is the thing, said Fancy Pants. They both laughed. How did you contact Octavia anyway? She heard me on the outside wall and invited me inside. Did you let her? Fancy Pants blinked. Like Fleur. The outside wall of the castle tower. In daylight, are you? Come on, Fancy. I need to keep in shape, right? Fleur winked. I might not be breaking into ancients anymore, but I'd go crazy if I didn't at least keep training. Training is one thing, but on the castle and in the light, get arrested, it would be a problem. Then I won't get caught. She kissed him on the cheek. As for whether I let her hear me, I believe I will leave that to your imagination. Fancy Pants chuckled. He couldn't stay displeased at Fleur for very long, and he knew that she was very skilled at not being seen when she didn't want to be. I think I can guess the answer. But, back with what you're looking on? What about the elements? Asked Fleur. If Greengrass were moved tomorrow, would they be able to beat him? I doubt it. I'm worried about Trixie's political abilities. She beat Octavia, but Octavia's talents aren't suited to a political fight. Going against Greengrass, she needs help. Greengrass can offer more to most ponies than she could use than she can, so she can't hope to buy or trade for allies. So she needs friends, said Fleur. Ponies who will stand by her even if it's not the most profitable opinion. Well or not, she needs to be a friend. I noticed that Greengrass tried to recruit Lyra and Carrot Top, and his plans for the other three, but none whatsoever for her. Spoiler alert: the Carrot Top thing is actually going to come later, but none whatsoever for her. He's going to hear for her allies first, and if she lets them have him, well, then she'll truly be alone. He'll be able to get her as well, and even we won't be able to stop him. Trixie fought for Lyra, but she only had to deal with Octavia, who was a political novice. I'm worried that she might let the other go too early if the fight is harder. I still think we should tell her, but even. No. Fancy Pants shook his head. We can't do everything for her. Greengrass isn't the only pony that will try and seize control of the elements. She knows how to deal with this problem. If we bail her out now, what happens when Corona tries, or another nation, well, we can't save her? He paused. Besides, Princess Luna has faith in her, and I trust the princess. As do I. Then we watch, observe, and bring information to the princess. That's our job. Fancy Pants floated over the bottle of wine and refilled the glasses. And where we can try and help out the ponies who get caught up in the court schemes. Full experience, and even if it takes a while, we ensure that the ponies who abuse that position on the court pay for it. Yes, we do, Fancy Pants smiled. That is one of the more enjoyable parts of the job. Fleur snuggled up against his side. By the way, if you want to learn how to walk with a different gait, I'd love to teach you. Teach me? Fancy Pants pretended to glare. I taught you everything you know about imitating a courtier's walk. Yes, but it wasn't me whose disguise was broken by a musician with no spy-catching training, was it? They both laughed. Back in the tower, Octavia resumed her practicing. She was far behind schedule and would likely have to skip lunch, but that didn't matter. Going without lunch was far less of a problem than letting her skill slip, however slightly through neglect. Actually, she thought, just before she began playing her warm-up piece, that Mayor might have a point. Just because I failed once doesn't mean I can't recover. No, that kind of thinking leads to lax performances. A musician who forgives herself errors is one step away from tolerating errors, and when that happens, her performances will suffer. But I made mistakes in performances before, and I practiced harder and overcame them. One mistake doesn't mean I can never play a piece. She shook her head. Those thoughts were traitorous, and she wouldn't thank them. She had integrity. She would not allow herself to think she was better than she really was. She was a phenomenal musician, and a failure as a friend. Any other thoughts to contradict those would be lies. But try as she might, even as she began to play, she couldn't quite shake the mayor's words from her head. And somehow she found it a little bit easier to play that warm and happy Grasshopper Sonata than she had a short while ago. So that is Canterlot Morning. It does, just like Musicians and Dreamers, this does set up some stuff because it shows that Luna is aware, and also this does have heavy foreshadowing towards a future story because, at this point, there's no moves made on Carrot Top, but we're gonna see those in here's right here. This is where I just realized why is that 9, 10 out of 10. Yeah, so we'll see that. So we'll see the thing with Carrot Top right here. So I give this a 5 out of 5. It's a really well done story. There's no flaw besides just the minor grammatical errors. And I'll see you next time. I don't really have much to say about this. This is an overall good story. I'll see you next with Scoot Along to the Cheer. This has been Dark Symphony 777 and cut.